I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago, around the Belmont and Cumberland area. I have an older brother, an older sister, and a younger sister, so I'm number 3 of 4 children. And we lived in a small ranch house. My dad built it in the early 50s, and we have lived in there, or I still live there. And I went to the same elementary school for 8 years, went to the same high school for 4 years, and graduated. And at some point in the high school years decided that I didn't really want to go on to college. And I had gotten a scholarship from Illinois for, I think it was the Illinois State Teachers Scholarship. And I had wanted to be a teacher at one point. I remember when I was younger, closing my bedroom door and teaching history to whoever was, animals or whatever that was in the bedroom there. But at some point, that didn't appeal to me anymore, and I can't really explain why, but the military entered my mind, and that I worked with a man whose brother was an Air Force recruiter, and I talked to him, took the tests, and got accepted, and went on to join the Air Force. Basically right after high school. I graduated in June and joined the military then in October. It was very interesting. While my parents supported me, I don't ever remember them saying, you shouldn't do this, but they didn't think I would be able to make it because I was very much a mama's girl. I remember my mom used to go bowling on Tuesday nights, and I would stand at the window and wait for her to come home. When I was around 10 years old, my dad's 2 sisters started taking me, my 2 sisters, and a female cousin of ours on vacation. And the first vacation we took was to Hot Springs, Arkansas. We went on the train, and I was fine for a few days, but then I started getting sick. And they had to take me to the hospital, and the diagnosis was homesickness. So my family was convinced that I would be back on a plane back home before basic training was ever completed. And I do remember that it was just really too busy for you to get homesick for very long, although I think it was probably 10 days into basic training where they finally let us make a phone call. And I made the phone call home and cried. But after that, I never looked back, although I don't know about this now, but I miss being home, and, it was always great to come home and all, but I just was determined that I was going to beat the homesickness. On Monday mornings, we would have to go for immunizations. 5 of the 6 weeks we were there, I believe it was, we had to go get immunizations of all kind. And I remember going through the line, and they used a gun basically to, you walked past, they punched it in your arm and shot you, and I have a couple of scars from where that tore the skin a little bit. And I remember the wake-ups. Somebody would have to be in the hallway at 5 a.m. It is 5 a.m., you will wake up, it's time to wake up, you will wake up, you will smell sweet or something like that. And that's how we started our day. And I remember being in the basement of the barracks doing ironing, polishing shoes, making sure the bed there was nothing sticking out from under the bed. Sheet-wise, everything had to be tucked in just so. And in the military is where I learned that there is a left and a right side to a hanger. And I still hang my clothes to this day a certain way. And if I see clothes put on a hanger a different way, then I want to change that. And one of the drill instructors, I think they were called training instructors, they were tough, but she ended up being a very compassionate person and likable by the end of basic training. And then when I moved on to technical school, is where you finally got integrated with guys going through the program too. And that's where I started to see a little bit of, I don't want to say pushback, but a little bit of intimidation, why are you here? Or they just try to buddy up to you and be Casanovas. It was just annoying. So I graduated from high school in June of 1968 and then joined in October of 1968. And so that was in the middle of the Vietnam War, basically. And the career field I was initially put into in the Air Force was called Aircraft Control and Warning. And that was part of the Air Defense Command, where I was assigned to sit side by side with an officer, and he would be talking and directing pilots of F-106s or the F-4s that were currently in the Air Force inventory on battle and combat missions. And I was stationed at Luke Air Force Base, and as the technician, I had to punch in the headings, altitude, speed type of stuff on my side of the console, and by data link, this information was transmitted to the aircraft. I love airplanes, and it was just cool. The Thunderbirds came, and I remember the one maneuver they did where I was working in the tower, and the one maneuver they did brought the aircraft past the tower below the window level, and we could look in and see the pilot's helmet, and it's just quite exciting. And we would say, I want to be the one to clear them for takeoff, or I want to be the one to clear them to land, because it was just neat. And then then I transferred to the radar portion, and the radar unit was down on the field close to the runway. And so occasionally, if it wasn't busy or I was on break, could just go outside and watch them come in and land. You couldn't get close to the runway, but it was just neat being around the airplanes. When my time was up in the Philippines, by that time I was almost 8 years in the military. But knowing that I could be picked up for another assignment somewhere else in the world and not be able to take my family, because by this time we had another child, we had a daughter. We made the decision to get out of the military. And we had purchased a house in the Phoenix area when we were stationed at Williams. And from Williams, we went to the Philippines, and then when we got discharged, we moved back to the house that we had in Arizona. And then we applied for the air traffic control job with the FAA, and then got picked up by the FAA for the Northern California area. So we both ended up in the San Francisco Bay Area. In the Philippines, I didn't see any combat or anything. I remember that I was there at the time of the end of the Vietnam War, and they were bringing in the plane loads of the refugees. So I saw some of the refugees coming in onto Clark Air Base, but still just really sheltered from that. The women who worked in the Korea, World War II, boy, hats off to them, because they were there. They weren't necessarily on the front line, but they were really close, and they were troopers for sure. Well, this happened a couple years later. I was able to retrain into air traffic control. And I remember one guy in particular who just always gave me a hard time about being a woman in the Air Force. And it just got old in a hurry. And I was bound and determined that I was going to get a better score and do better in the class than he did. And I don't remember now if I did, but I know that that type of attitude directed to me made me fight harder to get where I wanted to be, and I was determined to exceed, and I did. I think it changed me, and going back to that man or the fellow airman in that one class, it helped me then after I got out of the military and went then to work for the FAA for the same kind of treatment that I got from fellow controllers, that, why is a woman here? And again, it pushed me to exceed, to excel at my job and to become the best controller that I could be. Katherine Johnson with NASA, until I saw that movie, I never knew that there were so many women who worked at NASA. And the more I think about it, if it wasn't for those, and this may sound really sexist, but to me, if it wasn't for those women who did all that work, would the space program have been as successful at that time? No doubt there's men who could have stepped into that, but they took the men into other roles, giving women seemingly subordinate positions, but then the women just excelled, and they were the ones to come up with the numbers that John Glenn needed to get back. And maybe some of this, maybe I haven't done enough digging to know, is that really the truth? But I think it was that the women played much more of a role than we were ever led to believe or know, even, in that. And the men got all the glory, and the women were subordinate and kept behind the other side of the wall or the door. And we were all made, oh man, those guys are geniuses. Well, they were, but there were genius women there too. In any field, even news broadcasting, meteorology too. Now, there's so many female meteorologists, and it's not just a pretty face in front of a camera. These women are scientists, and they shouldn't be discounted because they're female. They're just as smart and capable as any man who has ever stepped in front of a green screen. When I worked in the FAA, I was part of groups that would go to schools and help educate young girls to, hey, if you want to learn how to fly an airplane, go for it. If you think that air traffic control or even aircraft maintenance is something that interests you, go for it. You don't have to be pigeonholed into an administrative job or, or something like that. And not to say that those aren't important jobs, and they are, but if that's not something that you're interested in, and you have a path to go somewhere else, at least try it. That's the best advice I would give to anybody, is if you even have an inkling that you want to try something, go for it. If you have a dream to do something that isn't being a homemaker or working in an office, if that really isn't something that you want to do, I think we're trying to make it okay for them to feel that way, because I think a lot of times in the past, women have felt guilty for wanting to do something that wasn't associated with being a homemaker or something that was a traditional woman's role back then. And I think that those boundaries of role playing are being broken. And even for men, I mean, for guys, hey, if going into the military isn't something for you, and there's something else you want to do, like I have a granddaughter who is in dance, and I've been seeing young boys going into dance. And if you think about it, you've got the male dancers and stuff. They had to start somewhere, and you don't just automatically wake up one morning and find yourself an accomplished dancer. That's hard work. And for a young boy to step away from wanting to play with guns or stuff like that, it's probably just as bad for a young boy to step out of the norm of what people think a boy should do, as it is for a young girl to step outside the norm for what people think a young girl should want to do. And it's courageous on their parts. Well, just really think about it and be honest with yourself. And if there's someone who you see as someone who could possibly answer questions for you, contact them or try to contact them, and don't try not to be afraid. I wanted to say don't be afraid, but that's easier said than done, because so many times you are, and hopefully you get the support of your parents and other family members to pursue that, and whatever dream it is that you have.